The gymnasium on West Pico Boulevard in Los Angeles had been open since 6 in the morning on the 14th of March 1974. By 9:30, 41 men were inside. The smell was familiar to all of them: canvas and chalk, floor wax worked thin by decades of bare feet, the faint copper of old sweat pressed into wood grain that no amount of cleaning ever fully lifted. The mats were green. The ceiling lights buzzed at a frequency just below the threshold of conscious hearing. Outside, a delivery truck was backing up a loading dock on the next street over, its reverse alarm bleeding at steady intervals, indifferent to everything happening on the other side of the wall. Standing at the center of those mats was a man named Raymond Garrett. He was 26 years old. He stood 6 feet and 1 inch tall and weighed 211 pounds without a gram of it unnecessary. He held the full contact karate regional championship title for the Pacific Southwest for the second consecutive year. He had competed in 31 sanctioned bouts and had not lost one. Not a decision. Not a draw. 31 times he had stepped onto a mat, and 31 times the other man had looked at the floor before Raymond Garrett looked at his. He had broken 2 men's ribs in competition. He had sent a former college wrestler home with a jaw wired shut. He had done all of this cleanly, within the rules, and the men who watched him understood that the rules were not what was keeping everyone safe. His speed was the specific kind that does not announce itself before it arrives. His right hand had been clocked in a testing session attended by a UCLA biomechanics researcher at 11/10ths of a second from chamber to full extension. At that distance, at that speed, most men could not register the movement had begun before it had already ended. On this particular morning, Raymond Garrett was demonstrating a combination to a group of 7 students arranged in a half circle around him. He was patient with them. He had earned the right to be impatient, and had chosen otherwise, which said something about him that the trophy case on the south wall could not fully express. He was midway through a correction to a student's rear foot position when the front door opened. What happened in the 47 seconds that followed would be told in dojos and training halls across 4 states for the next 22 years. The men who were there would tell it differently in some of the details, and identically in all of the ones that mattered. The youngest student present, a 19-year-old named Clifford Ayers, would recount it verbatim to his own students 30 years later. Raymond Garrett himself would speak of it only once in a single paragraph published in a regional martial arts newsletter in 1987, and in that paragraph he did not name the other man. He did not need to. In 47 seconds, everything in that gymnasium changed direction. If you want to know what happened when the door opened, make sure you are subscribed and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from. This community has been growing every single week, and the next part of this story is the reason why. Raymond Garrett had come to the gym on a Tuesday with every reason to feel secure. His name was on the front window. The black lettering read, Garrett's Karate and Self-Defense Studio, established 1971. 3 years old and already the best reviewed training facility between Santa Monica and Culver City. He had built it himself, not with investors, but with prize money and private lessons given at 5:30 in the morning before his own training began. His students competed and placed. 2 of them had qualified for national amateur brackets. The gym was his proof of concept, his argument made physical, that what he understood about combat could be transmitted. That understanding was the product he was selling, and that his understanding was complete. His assistant instructor that morning was a man named Gerald Shue, a former collegiate wrestler who had trained with Garrett for 2 years and earned his 2nd-degree rank under him. Gerald stood near the equipment wall watching the demonstration, arms folded, chin slightly raised. He was 24 and had the posture of a man who had been told he was exceptional often enough to have stopped questioning it. Gerald Shue would become important later, not for what he did, but for what he did not do. The front door, when it opened quietly. The man who came through it was not dressed for training. He wore a denim jacket, plain and unwashed, the collar turned up against a March morning that had not yet decided what temperature it wanted to be. Beneath the jacket, a white crew neck shirt, dark trousers, shoes that were not athletic shoes. He carried nothing. He stopped 2 steps inside the door and waited. He appeared to be in his mid-30s. He was, by the standard of the room, unremarkable in size, 5 feet 10 inches at a generous estimate, 170 pounds. He had a face that was quiet in a way that faces are sometimes quiet when they have settled all their arguments internally, and have nothing left to prove outward. His hair was uncovered, his hands were still. Nobody greeted him immediately. That was the first thing Clifford Ayres remembered later. Not that a stranger had entered, but that nobody moved toward him right away, and in that pause, the stranger did not appear to mind. Raymond Garrett finished his correction to the student's foot position and turned. He looked at the man by the door the way a champion looks at an unknown quantity, briefly, categorically. And with a verdict reached within 3 seconds. The verdict was visible in what Garrett did next, which was to turn back to his students without altering his expression. He raised his voice by exactly enough to carry the room. "Can I help you?" It was not a question in the way he said it. The man by the door said he was looking for a place to train. Garrett studied him a second time. The jacket, the street shoes, the absence of a bag. "You have training experience," Garrett said. The man by the door said he had some. What Raymond Garrett said next was the mistake. Not a mistake of technique. Not a mistake of preparation. A mistake of a different and more consequential kind. The kind a man makes when he has been the largest thing in every room he has entered for long enough that he has forgotten to check whether the room has changed. He said, "We train serious fighters here. This is not a beginner's class. If you are looking for something more introductory, there is a community center 2 blocks east on Robertson. They run a Tuesday morning session, probably more your level." The room went quieter than it had been a moment before, which was already quiet. Gerald Shue unfolded his arms. 2 of the 7 students exchanged a look. The man by the door said nothing for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had not changed register. It was the same level tone he had used to say he was looking for a place to train, as if the room between those 2 sentences had not shifted beneath everyone's feet. He said, "All right. Perhaps a brief demonstration then, so you can judge the level." Raymond Garrett smiled. It was not a cruel smile. It was the smile of a man who has been asked for the 10,000th time to confirm something he already knows to be true, and who has agreed to do so again because the alternative is explaining himself, and explaining himself has never struck him as a good use of his morning. He said, "If you want. Gerald, take the mat." He did not know who was standing inside his front door. Nobody in that gymnasium did. He had already lost. He simply did not know it yet. Gerald Shue stepped onto the mat with the particular deliberateness of a young man who has been handed an easy assignment and intends to be efficient about it. He rolled his shoulders once. He set his feet. He raised his hands to a guard position that was technically correct in every observable measurement. He was, by any reasonable assessment of the 41 people inside that building, the second best fighter in the room. The man in the denim jacket set the jacket down on a folding chair near the door. He folded it once, deliberately along the original crease lines, and placed it on the seat with the collar facing up. He removed his shoes. He set them side by side beneath the chair with the same unhurried attention. He walked to the mat in his socks and stopped at the edge and waited. He did not stretch, he did not rotate his neck, he did not shake his hands loose or roll his wrists or do any of the paratory movements that fighters use to signal to a room that they are about to perform. He simply stood at the edge of the mat and waited, as if waiting were a thing he had an unlimited supply of and no particular need to spend quickly. Garrett watched from the side. His arms were crossed. His expression had not changed. Gerald Shue, because he was 24, and because he had been told he was exceptional and because he had earned a second-degree rank under a 2-time regional champion, made a decision that cost him the next 20 seconds of his dignity. He came forward without waiting. He threw a crisp jab, technically clean, from a correct shoulder line, the kind of punch that landed on every other man who had stood across from him in that training hall. The man in the socks was no longer in front of it. He had not stepped back. He had not raised a hand. He had moved laterally by approximately 14 inches, which was exactly as far as he needed to move and not 1 inch further, at a timing that placed him beside Gerald's extended arm rather than in front of it. Gerald's fist passed through air. The specific silence of a training room when something unexpected occurs is different from ordinary silence. It has a texture. The two students who had exchanged a look did not exchange another one. They were watching. Second 2. Gerald reset. To his credit, he reset cleanly, without the hesitation that embarrassment sometimes introduces. He threw a cross. A real one with hip rotation with commitment, the punch that represented the better part of what he had. The man in the sock slipped it. Not a large movement. A movement of approximately 8 inches off the center line. The head rolling away from the incoming force along a path that made the force irrelevant. His hands did not come up. His expression did not change. He was inside Gerald's arm at the completion of the slip, close enough that Gerald could have felt his breath. He did not strike. He waited there, 1 second, inside the range where Gerald could not throw cleanly, and then he stepped back to the edge of the contact zone and reset. The tournament director who ran 3 Pacific Southwest brackets, a man named Vince Calloway, was standing against the equipment wall with his coffee cup held in both hands. He had set the cup down at the conclusion of the first exchange.
He had not picked it up again. A fight is not 2 men attempting to hit each other. This is what most people see when they watch a fight, because most people watch the hands. A fight is a negotiation about distance.
The man who controls the distance controls the terms of the negotiation, and the man who controls the terms of the negotiation has already written the outcome before the first exchange occurs. What the stranger in the socks was doing had a name. That name was not aggression. That name was geometry. He was demonstrating, with a patience that was itself a form of commentary, that he could place himself wherever in the space between them he chose to be, and that Gerald Sue's tools were calibrated for a man who stayed where Gerald expected him to stay. The man was not staying. Second 3. Gerald Sue threw a low kick, the leg attack, the one technique that does not require the head to be where you left it. It was a good kick. It connected with the outer thigh, the specific placement trained to buckle the base, and it did land. That had to be acknowledged. It landed cleanly. The man in the socks absorbed it. He let the weight of it pass through his stance rather than resist it, the way a dock pile bends in a current rather than snapping against it. His base did not buckle. His expression registered the kick the way a man registers a firm handshake as information received, noted, filed, and then he extended his right hand palm up, fingers open toward Gerald Sue's shoulder. Not a strike, a gesture, a designation of contact. A tap, delivered at approximately 1/4 the speed his hand was capable of traveling, to the specific midpoint of Gerald's clavicle. He held it there. Gerald Sue's shoulder, the open palm resting on it, with no more force than a man placing a paper on a desk. He said quietly to Gerald and to no one else in the room, "I could have put that there 6 different ways in the last 3 seconds. I did not. I am going to step back now." He stepped back. Gerald Sue stood where he was. Raymond Garrett did not move for 4 seconds. Nobody in the room moved in those 4 seconds. The delivery truck on the next street was still backing, still beeping, still indifferent. The ceiling lights still buzzed. The light still lay flat on the far wall the way light does at 9:30 in March in Los Angeles, making no drama of itself, going about its business. Garrett uncrossed his arms. He walked to the mat. He stopped at the edge where the stranger was standing, and he looked at him in a way that was different from the first 2 times he had looked at him. The assessment was gone from it. What remained was something quieter, and something that cost him more. He said, "Who are you?" It was still not quite a question. The man in the socks said his name. There was a beat in the room of perhaps 2 seconds. Clifford Ayers, 19 years old, student for 7 months, standing in the second position of the half circle, understood those 2 seconds for what they were. He would describe them 30 years later as the 2 seconds in which the room reorganized itself around a new center. What he meant was that every person inside that building recalibrated, simultaneously and without discussion, the distance between who they had assumed was standing at the edge of the mat and who was actually standing there. The man's name was Chuck Norris. He was, at the time of this particular Tuesday morning, a six-time world professional middleweight karate champion. He had trained under Tang Soo Do masters. He had studied Tang Soo Do, Taekwondo, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He was teaching private lessons to Steve McQueen and had been for 2 years. He had walked into this gymnasium on West Pico Boulevard in Los Angeles because he had been told by a man he trusted that it was a serious training facility, and he had come in with the intention of observing and possibly of learning. He had not come to demonstrate anything. He had not come to correct anyone. He had been invited onto the mat, and he had accepted, and he had done what he did on a mat, which was the minimum necessary and nothing more. Vince Calloway, the tournament director, retrieved his coffee cup from the equipment wall. He found it had gone cold. He drank it anyway.
Raymond Garrett stood at the edge of the mat and looked at the floor for a moment. Then he looked up. The men in the room watched him make the calculation, the specific calculation that only presents itself to a man who has publicly staked his standing on a judgment that has just been proven insufficient. There was a version of the next moment in which Raymond Garrett said something careful.
Something that preserved the architecture. Something professionally correct, that acknowledged the quality of what he had observed without conceding the full size of the error he had made at the front door. He did not take that version. He said, "I made an assumption about you that I had no right to make. I am sorry for it." He said it to Norris directly, and with his voice at the same volume the room required, and not quietly in the manner of a man hoping to be overheard as little as possible. He said it plainly, in front of 41 people, in his own gymnasium, with his name on the window. Chuck Norris extended his hand. As Norris turned to leave, after the handshake, after the brief and quiet exchange that followed, Vince Calloway stepped forward and placed a hand on Norris's shoulder at the door. It was not a detained gesture. It was the gesture of a man who needed to confirm the physical reality of something he had watched happen. He let go after a moment. He said nothing. He didn't have to. The story left the room in West Pico Boulevard the same way all stories of this kind leave the room, in pieces, carried by different people, accelerating as it moved outward. Gerald Shue told it first, that same evening, to a training partner at a different facility in Burbank. He told it accurately, which said something about him that the morning had not initially suggested. He included the part about his own techniques not landing. He included the lateral slip. He included the open palm on his clavicle and the 6 words that accompanied it, and he did not soften them. Clifford Ayers told his mother, she did not train, she did not know the name. He explained it to her anyway. Vince Calloway, in his capacity as regional tournament director, mentioned it at an organizational meeting 3 weeks later. He did not editorialize. He stated the facts in the order they had occurred, and left them there for the room to process, which the room did in the particular silence that descends on a group of experienced people, who have just heard something they intend to think about for a long time. By the autumn of 1974, the story had passed through 7 different training systems across California, Arizona, and Nevada. In some versions, the number of students present had grown to 60. In others, Gerald Shue had initiated with a kick rather than a jab. In one version circulating in Phoenix, Garrett had challenged Norris directly rather than directing Gerald to the mat. None of these variants changed what the story was about. Oral history has never been precise about geography. It is always precise about the thing that matters. Raymond Garrett trained for another 11 years before an injury to his left knee ended his competitive career. He closed the West Pico gym in 1981 and opened a second, larger location in Torrance. He was known, in the years that followed, for the particular quality of attention he gave to unknown students who came through his door. Former students reported that he had a practice, when meeting a new person for the first time, of asking them to show him something before he told them what he thought. He never explained publicly where this practice had come from. Chuck Norris continued teaching. He continued learning. He would later say, in the memoir he published in 2004, that the most persistent lesson his career had delivered was the inadequacy of appearance as a measure of capacity. He wrote that he had walked into a great many rooms in which he had been underestimated and that he had never found a way to be angry about it, because the correction was always provided so quickly and at no lasting cost to either party. He did not mention the gymnasium on West Pico in that passage. He did not need to. The men who knew the story would recognize what he was describing. The 47 seconds on those green mats in March of 1974 became, in the telling, a story about a champion's mistake. And it was that. But it was also a story about what Raymond Garrett did in the moment after the mistake, and that part of the story traveled just as far and outlasted the other part in the memory of every man who had been in the room. A man reveals nothing about himself when he is right. He reveals everything when he is wrong, and the room is watching. Gerald Sue eventually opened his own training facility in Pasadena. He named it, according to one account from a former student, with deliberate understatement. He said that he had chosen the name because he had learned, on a Tuesday morning he never forgot, that the size of a thing and the danger of a thing are two measurements that sometimes have nothing to do with each other, and that a school should say so from the beginning. The ceiling lights at the gym on West Pico were replaced in 1976. The green mats went in 1978. By 1981, when the building was leased to a different business, there was no physical trace of what had happened there. The story, however, had no material to lose. It did not require the mats or the lights or the building. It required only the telling. And the telling had found more than enough willing mouths. What the 47 seconds on West Pico Boulevard teaches is not a lesson about fighting. It is not a lesson about reputation or recognition or how a name on a window can make a man believe he has already read the room before he has entered it. It is a lesson older than martial arts and simpler than technique. Certainty, carried too far, becomes a wall between a man and what is actually in front of him. It is not a comfortable wall. It does not feel like a wall from the inside. From the inside, it feels like experience, like pattern recognition, like earned knowledge. From the outside, in the 47 seconds before the correction arrives, it looks like a door someone has accidentally left unlatched. A man who has learned something genuinely has earned the right to be confident in that learning. He has not earned the right to stop looking. Those are two different things, and the gap between them is exactly the space through which someone unexpected will always walk. Next week we will be looking at the day Bruce Lee walked into a closed-door session in Hong Kong that none of the men inside it had agreed to share, and what happened when the room's most experienced instructor made the decision to find out, in front of everyone present, exactly who had just come through the door. That story has not been told the way it actually happened. We are going to tell it. Leave a comment below with where you are watching from. And if this is the first time you have found this channel, make sure you are subscribed before the next one goes up. You will not want to come back to find you missed it.